Hey, what's up guys? Today, I'll show you a horror series, Cabinet of Curiosities, Lot 36. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The story begins with the narrator telling us about the creation of a new collection called the Cabinet of Curiosities. It could possess all kinds of tokens, such as a dragon's tooth, a unicorn's horn, or a mermaid's smelly part. The narrator now takes a set of keys and tells us that the story we're about to witness is called Lot 36. Now we see the news talking about the wars in Iraq and Kuwait and how the United Nations can help ensure world peace. Watching the news is a tired old man and the owner of a warehouse. He doesn't look too pleased by the news. He casually walks to the dustbin and dumps his lunch into it, after which he reveals a set of keys with the number 36 on it. After that, owner chops up some meat, which is later revealed to be for something hideous. However, his old heart gives in and he falls to the ground, seemingly dead. Now, we see a war veteran named Nick who's listening to the radio talking about the need to prioritize white lives. He drives his mini truck to a warehouse and enters it to place bids on Lot 36, as owner is now dead. Inside the warehouse is a dealer talking about the 3 Ds: death, divorce, and debt. The dealer finishes his lecture and gives all the attendants a sneak peek into Lot 36, after which he proceeds with the auction. The bidding process begins on a slow note, but then Nick shows off his deep pockets despite being a shy man. He easily wins the bidding war and lays claim to Lot 36. Dealer is happy with the sale, but Nick hears from his loan shark later. It turns out that he's borrowed money from the loan shark and is now in deep trouble. We also learn that Dealer is Nick's buddy and they carry out shady deals together. Nick is a little low on cash, so he offers to pay Dealer his cut on a recent gold deal by check, but Dealer wants cash. After paying him, Nick wants to check his lot, but Dealer shows him a video first. It reveals owner coming and checking out his lot every day for an hour and a half. He brings a box with him, presumably containing the meat that we saw him chopping earlier. Nick and Dealer agree that there's something fishy about owner, especially after seeing him hop around like a bad bunny. Nick agrees to look into the twisted owner's actions and takes his keys from Dealer. Nick sets off on his mission after showing Dealer the finger, and then an old lady comes to pay her dues to Dealer. It turns out that she has left behind some of her personal items inside Lot 36, as she rented the same Lot 36 before Nick. Dealer tells her that he had sent her an eviction notice, but the tenant says that she changed her address, which is probably why she didn't realize the lot was being put up for an auction. Dealer is in a tricky situation, so he quickly tells the tenant to talk to Nick about what's gone down. She does so, but Nick isn't too keen on talking to her. He maintains that he's the legal owner of her lot now, and he doesn't care if her family pictures and letters are still inside the unit. The tenant tries to talk nicely to him, but it's of no use because Nick is only willing to return her old lock to her. She insults Nick, and it pisses him off. Now, Nick goes to check up on his lot, but it's a mess, and he needs to fix everything inside. He goes to Dealer to complain about it, but Dealer says there's nothing he can do. He's also trying to fix up a pipe, but it bursts, so he goes to get a mop. Nick confronts Dealer for sending the former tenant to ambush him, so the two men get into an argument. Nick brings up his time during the war and says he's had to face enough smelly bullshit, but Dealer says that Nick had it easier than the people from his community. Nick doesn't have time for these guilt trips, so he calls out Dealer on his manipulative words and says he bought the lot fair and square. Then, he clears out his lot and goes to dump the garbage, but the lights start to flicker briefly. The issue gets fixed by itself, so Nick doesn't think much of it and goes back to his lot. There he goes through all the items stored inside and comes across an old photo book from the war. He goes through it without suspicion, and then he finds a candle holder that he loads into his bag. After further inspection, he finds some fancy chairs, a board, and a table mount, but then gets jump scared by a rat. Regardless, he takes this stuff and goes back to his mini truck. However, Nick gets ambushed by the loan shark, who smashes his car and smacks his head. The loan shark orders Nick to pay back $12,000, after which he smashes the mini truck to make a point. Meanwhile, the tenant lady watches all of this unfold, but Nick tells her to walk her aging body away. He gets some first aid treatment at Dealer's home, but ignores his advice to take a chill pill. Nick takes his lot's items to a lady trader, but she says she'll only pay scrap for the candle holder. The table and chairs are valuable enough for the trader, but she also mentions that the mount is a seance table. Nick thinks that the table is like the Ouija ones, but the trader says it's more complicated than that. Regardless, Nick opens the table drawers and finds 3 books with Latin writing. The trader doesn't want to get involved with this, so she suggests an assessor to help with the books. Now, Nick brings out the board, and the trader gets excited because it's made of human hair. Nick only wants to make money from his items, so the trader quickly informs her business partner, an assessor, to come take a look at the books. Assessor makes an introduction and quickly assesses Nick's items. He suggests that the table has been injected with human blood, but Nick simply calls him a sick freak. Assessor laughs out loud, but changes his expression once he sees the books. He says that the 3 books Nick currently has are part of a quartet. The 3 books are worth $10,000, but when combined with the 4th, they can fetch $300,000. Assessor explains that these books can be used to bind demons and make them earthbound. The 4th book in particular is the rarest because it is based upon a summoning deal made between a human and a demon. Once the demon consumes a soul, the book would burn down, thus freeing the demon from its deal with the summoning human. However, Assessor mentions that things can get tricky when a demon gets betrayed, such as what happened with Owner in this case, who had died while the demon was still bound to him. Nick isn't bothered by the demon stories, but is interested in finding the 4th book so that he can get a check for $300,000 from Assessor. So they get set and travel in Nick's mini truck to search for the 4th book in Lot 36. On the way, Assessor explains that Owner was into steel, but had worked for the wrong side during the war. Nick is told that Owner was pure evil and was also part of an occult group which believed in offering people's bodies to demons as vessels. Owner had actually offered his own sister as a vessel to a demon, and it became a huge controversy. But Nick tells Assessor to shut up his assessing mouth. Now, the two reach Lot 36 and open it up. Assessor brings the candle holder along for good measure, and then they search the unit for the 4th book. Time passes by, but without any result, so Nick goes to dump some of the scrap into the dustbin. He warns Assessor not to steal anything, but Assessor only wants to find the truth behind Owner's missing vessel sister. He eventually locates some news articles talking about the disappearance of certain people, including Owner's vessel sister. As Nick dumps the garbage, the tenant lady watches him from a distance, but doesn't show herself. Now Nick comes back to the unit and finds a hollow space, so he and Assessor work together to open it up. They find a passage, so Assessor tells Nick to follow his instructions because the dark forces on the other side of this threshold might consume him. Nick ignores his advice, and the 2 men walk into the smelly passage. Tensions rise as they cross newspaper clippings and religious statues, but the biggest surprise arrives when they find the dead body of Owner's vessel sister on top of a demonic symbol. Assessor warns Nick against doing anything stupid, but he spots the 4th book suddenly and goes to get it. However, he happens to step on the demonic symbol in the process, and it awakens the demon resting inside the body of Owner's vessel sister. But the demon now seems very weak because of its lack of new offerings for a long time. The demon crawls out of the body vessel, flexing its GPS tentacles. It then attacks Assessor and gobbles him up while Nick watches on in horror. The 4th book bursts into flames just as Assessor had said, indicating that the summoning deal is completed with the new soul consumed and the 4th book burned. It's revealed that Owner kept feeding the demon with numerous human bodies, hoping to summon the demon to plague the unfair world. But his years of effort turn out to be no success. However, after Owner's unexpected death, the summoning deal is completed by Nick and Assessor by accident. In fear of the GPS monster, Nick runs away, hoping to save his miserable life like a desperate housewife. A terrifying chase follows, and Nick is almost at the exit, but the door is firmly locked. The tenant lady appears and gives Nick some hope, but she taunts him by placing the same lock on the door that he had given her earlier. Nick is given a taste of karma because he had refused to help the old tenant lady with her personal items back when she had spoken to him nicely. With no other means of escape, the movie ends with Nick turning around and finding the demon, which consumes him instantly. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.